Morning everybody, welcome to another week in leisure lockdown. Hope you're all well. We won't bleat on about how cheesed off we were last week, but we were very, very cheesed off. Right, today we're going to cover, I think Jill's pretty much covered all of that, what we're covering today. Government guidance, leisure related, industry, our updates. Sam, thank you for coming, and questions at the end. So I'm going to hand you over straight away to Ian. Ian, are you out there?
I'm out there, and I'm unmuted. So, hi everybody. As you know, for those who were on the clinic last week, I was out at site when we were doing the presentation, and it's a shame I hadn't done a walk through a video of the way that site had addressed the issues. We think it's an excellent example, and hopefully if that had been the template that perhaps had been presented to government, then we might not be where we are today. A lot has changed though in the week. I will talk about some of the great things I saw. Last week I went to about 6 sites and saw how they were addressing it. So hopefully that, together with Sam's experience of reopening on Guernsey, might give some flavour of what we're going to go through in the next few weeks and months. Clearly the announcement came on the 23rd that sadly for us, we weren't going to be unlocked, but that other industries were going to be able to start unlocking. It will be really, really interesting to see this weekend how the pubs manage and restaurants manage the reopening, because I think there'll be lots of lessons to be learnt from that. We all know that pubs, cinemas, some visitor attractions, hotels and campsites will be able to reopen. It's great to see some things beginning to work, and hopefully so long as they maintain the key principles in this and recognise the sources of transmission, which I think we need to, and comply with that, then hopefully we should be able to see a return to some normality without the much talked about increase in spikes which might reoccur. Clearly there are other venues that are also going to be allowed to open, community centres, and some of you might have those type of facilities, and we'll talk about some of those later, in that they're not as open as you think. They're not allowed to take part in physical activity or other sports within it. It's more for meetings and very passive activities. Other businesses, as you know, which are required not to open yet, include things like nail bars, beauticians, etc. And they're as much, I think, to do with the fact that they're face-to-face, not only close contact, but lots of those beauticians and nails sit in front of the person, whereas hairdressers predominantly work from behind their clients. So I can see why they've come to some of the decisions. And I think, unfortunately, we're still in that category because of this issue to do with exhaled hair, aerosol in the environment in the close confines of an indoor gym and fitness environment. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Clearly, we are on different timescales on different devolved authorities. Northern Ireland have announced they are going to reopen gyms on the 10th of July. They're going to be reopening indoor sports centres and skating rinks on the 7th of August, and leisure centres and soft play areas on the 7th of August. It will be interesting to see how they go and how they manage those before where we are within this process. Scotland, similarly, playgrounds can reopen from the 29th, and other sport and leisure not considered until phase 3, which I don't think is until the 9th of July, and it's unlikely to be before the 23rd of July. And similarly, Wales have got different procedures in place, and they at this point in time haven't got any clear indication of when they might be looking to reopen. Okay, next slide, please. The big other thing that changed during the week was a discussion around social distancing, which on the face of it might have looked as though they've changed things, but in reality they haven't. they have not reduced the distance to 1 metre. It's 1 metre plus where there is mitigation, and those mitigating circumstances are down to time, whether it cannot be avoided, and whether you are wearing issues like face masks. So it is still very much 2 metres within the environment in which we're working. So the reality is nothing has changed. Queuing should still be 2 metres. So therefore the distancing markers on your floors are still going to be as applicable as they were today as they were last week. And I can't see for the time being that this will change very much. So the 2 metre really changes. It's more in the workplace or where it cannot be avoided, and other mitigation is being put in place. And we've seen that in the pubs. And if you turn to the next slide, it's still very much, this is the sign that you have to sign up to and display in your front windows. And the bit we've highlighted in red states, we have taken all reasonable steps to maintain 2 metre distancing in the workplace. Where people cannot be 2 metres apart, we have done everything practical to manage transmission risks. So that still is there, still remains, and it is still our legal obligation to try and make sure we adhere to that. Just to reiterate, for anyone who thinks that the 2 metres has been reduced, it's more nuanced and terminology that they're using rather than any real practical changes that reduce that distance. If I can have the next slide, please. And there was clear guidance sent out to various operators, and we've put the links here, so when you get these presentations you'll be able to look at it. I think the guidance for pubs and restaurants was interesting, and it applies to us as well, in that they have focused very heavily on the impact of people raising their voice, needing to shout, with the increased risk of aerosol transmitting. And they have clearly stated that music, sound levels must be at a level that allow people to talk at an ordinary level. Anybody who has to get close to talk, anybody who has to raise their voice to be heard, has got to be discouraged. And within our environments of music, within classes, music as background, these will have to be included in your risk assessments and recognised as being something that you do not want to be caught having loud music which causes people to have to shout or talk loudly to be heard, or come closer together to be heard. And it's one of the mitigating issues, is to reduce the noise levels in our venues that enable 2 metres to be effectively operated. And where we think 2 metres, such as classes, where the instructor is shouting out at the class, 2 metres might not be even successful if there are not mitigating circumstances, such as using amplification systems to amplify their voices, and or screens between them and their clientele who are all facing them. So things to think about in your risk assessments as we come back towards some kind of reopening. Lots of guidance there for you to look at, things that you can subscribe to get the regular updates, just as we have. Okay, next slide, please. Again, there's a whole series of industry best practice updates you can log on to, RLS webinars that have been recorded that you can go back onto, Swim England webinars, UK Active, CIMSPA guidance and CIMSPA webinars that are coming, we know, this week or next week. There's a whole bunch of really relevant information on the London Sports website. And sorry, I keep getting things flashing through the screen. I can't see the slides. Sport England have currently also got guidance on funding, support and advice. So lots for you to look at, lots for you to use to help support what you're doing. Now, these were some of the better news issues that we saw or heard about. Les Ormes, which is in Jersey, the trampoline park was finally allowed to reopen on the 1st of July after a false start. So it'll be interesting, and we will keep in contact with them. And I believe next week we've got them on the webinar to talk through their experiences as well. One client we went to had come up with a very simple way of helping reduce the amount of work they needed to do for Legionella, in that they'd actually taken all their shower heads out and the sprinkly things in taps and cleaned them once and for all. They're only going to put them back when we get allowed to open, so it reduced a work that they had to do. And if this goes on much longer, could be something you're thinking of. They'd also very cleverly worked out that some of the bands they use in gym aerobics classes could be tied around their percussion caps to allow them to flush for a long period of time while they move on to the next one. Very simple time-saving task for the one person that had to go in and flush all the taps in that building. They'd also very cleverly, on their screens, on their CV equipment, it managed to put displays that come up between users that tell them to make sure they follow the one-way system around the gym, to keep 2 meters apart. And there was a third slide that came up reminding them to use the sanitizers and to wipe the equipment down with the sanitizer after they'd used it. This site also had quite robustly spread equipment out and moved it into other areas that couldn't be used, and had made very effective use. And they were anticipating that once we do get the go-ahead, they will be able to maintain the same number of members as they currently were successfully hosting. So with some clever thinking, with some robust systems, there are ways that you can work around this. Their machines had also been programmed that it told them how long they had left of their hour within the gym. So it enabled them to plan their movements around the gym, particularly if they're coming towards the end of the hour slot that their booking times had predicted for them. And training. It's essential for a smooth reopening that you do retrain and reinduct staff in all essentials, from your NOP with all the additions added on top of it for COVID, to COVID awareness training. And we, as we've trailed in the past, have just launched our online training opportunity for organisations to use, and for our clients a very well discounted price for people. But it is vital that you do think about your retraining before you finally reopen, and make sure people are fully trained. And now I will hand you over to Sam Herridge from Guernsey, who can talk through their experience of reopening the Beausejour Leisure Centre. Sam.
Sam, before you start, you just need to let me know when to move on to the next slide. I forgot to tell you that this morning, sorry.
It's all right, no worries. Hi everybody. So I'll give you a quick introduction to Beausejour Leisure Centre. I think from what Caroline was saying earlier on, that I'm the first person to thankfully be presenting from inside an office in a leisure centre, which is really nice to say. And all I can say is things will get back to normal. And there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I will finish on that as well. Just an introduction to Beausejour Leisure Centre. Beausejour Leisure Centre is the only community facility in Guernsey. It averages around a footfall of 600,000 per annum. It's a wet and dry facility. We have a sports hall, we have 25 metre swimming pool, the only public community swimming pool on the island. We've got also an events hall, and also a 400-seat theatre. So it's quite a varied sports and leisure centre, of course, your standard gym and studios as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So my name's Sam Herridge. I'm proud to say I'm Head of Recreation Services, which is the service area that reopened the first leisure facilities in the British Isles following the COVID-19 pandemic. We reopened with social distancing and other restrictions in place on Thursday the 4th of June, and since Monday the 22nd of June have been reopened now without restrictions. Now that's largely due to the fact, and I need to emphasise this, we're in a very different position to the UK currently. As long as I've just checked the update, but today, if we get the notification, will be the 60th consecutive day of no new known cases of COVID-19. So our R number has been 0 now for the past 60 days. So we are in a very different place. We have our own legal structure. We have our own Director of Public Health. We have our own political system. So we have the freedom to deal with things in a very, very different way. And in essence, when lockdown first happened on the 24th of March, our borders were shut completely and utterly, and anybody returning back to the island from holiday, such as myself, had to go into quarantine for 14 days. And that has remained the case right the way throughout. And even now, we're in what we call our bailiwick bubble, but anybody returning to the island or coming to the island still has to self-quarantine for 14 days or risk a fine of up to £10,000. And yes, somebody has already been fined £6,000. So they are very, very serious about keeping our community safe, and we're very serious about acting like a community. Guernsey Together is our new slogan currently. I've been working in the industry now for the past 20 years, give or take the odd blip, both here in Guernsey and in the UK, and at all times for local government. Hopefully this morning I'm going to share some experiences with you along with some priorities what you may want to consider when formulating your reopening strategy. Next slide, please. One thing to remember during this time is that customers are really keen to get back. They're keen to get back to a new normal. They're keen to get back to seeing people. They're keen to get back to seeing you, and also having faith in your processes and your procedures. But they also need to be aware that they also have a community responsibility and personal responsibility for acting in accordance to the guidelines, whatever they are in whichever country you're in. As you can see from ours, we were very much dictated by public health, and we were very lucky. They were very, very clear guidelines. So when we were talking about social distancing, it was very clear: 2 metres safest, 1 metre safer, 0 metres least safe. And as you can see from our comms, we retained a sense of humour throughout the whole process. Next slide, please. So, hints and tips. My key one is under promise, but try to over deliver. These are really, really strange times for us at the moment. And we're still not back to normal. The impact of COVID-19 has been felt throughout the centre. In terms of staffing, although we're back to business as usual, there are a number of activities and facilities that haven't necessarily reopened because we don't have the staff to do so. So for example, thinking about when your memberships kick in and how you're collecting your memberships, we decided actually, because all of our established staff were still being paid right the way throughout the process because they were State of Guernsey civil servants, we use our established staff only for our Keep Fit classes. We're not bringing in any casual staff. And the main reason for this is because we're not collecting any membership fees until the 2nd of July. Now that has meant that yes, we're not getting income during this time, but we're seeing it as a bit of a lost leader in the fact that actually we've got people back in the gym. They're not complaining because there was limited access during the initial 2 weeks of the social distancing phase. But also it's that giving something back to the community that has essentially played its part. And so I think hopefully in the long term that will pay us dividends back. Again, it keeps it very simple for us because we don't need to worry about all the background operations and background administration. So keep it simple and try your best to over-deliver. If opening while social distancing in operation, make everything you can bookable. It really does help. You make sure that you know exactly who is in your centre at what time. You know, for a track and trace, for example. It controls numbers. We also had a welcome desk in our reception area, which meant that anybody coming to the centre who didn't have an activity booked or wasn't intending to book an activity was not allowed in. They were asked to leave. So therefore we kept a close control on who was in the centre. We had their contact details, so to enable for the track and trace it was very, very easy. It was a bit strange for people to get used to that, but you'll see later on in the presentation how people have reacted to that. But make sure your IT system can cope. Ours did fall over within the first hour. We got it back up again, and our suppliers have been really, really useful and helpful. But your IT system may not be suitable in terms of online bookings, so think about how you're going to accept those bookings. Would it be phone bookings? Do you have the staff to be able to accept those phone bookings? Would it be via email? How are you going to process that? Work through the process. Keep things simple. Make it easy for yourself to succeed. From our perspective, our public health guidelines regarding cleaning were really, really quite in-depth and very, very strict. So to make sure that we adhere to that, we closed off as many areas that we could. The dry changing rooms were closed, therefore we didn't have to clean them. We weren't allowing people in certain areas. We weren't allowing people onto viewing balconies and all those kind of things. So close off as many areas as you can. It reduces that requirement for cleaning. And again, only allowing access for those booked activities. Risk assess your access and egress routes and try and avoid pinch points. So although our centre has been modernised, it was originally built in the 1970s and still has some really narrow corridors. So a few of us, before we reopened, came in and actually started walking around the centre and thinking about where those pinch points were. And we actually implemented a one-way system around the centre for those limited activities that we had during that 2-week period. The other thing is think about your process in terms of if you're going to still operate classes, where are the people going to wait for those classes? And how is the area big enough for them to still be socially distanced? We were lucky, we've got a big concourse area outside the events hall where we moved all the classes, and it was big enough for social distancing. So you can see in terms of that kind of aspect, it's thinking about the whole process rather than just, right, they go from reception to the class, well, what about the bit in between? Next slide, please. And again, your comms is key, and I'm just going to intersperse some of this with some of the comms that we did, and we were helped by our central team as well. So again, one-way systems for our swimming pool. It was a case of arriving beach ready for the pool, entering via the temporary entrance that we made via the cafe straight onto poolside. Each member then had each customer then had a dedicated table on poolside which they put their belongings. Again, we're lucky, we have a very close community with a low crime rate, so there wasn't necessarily the risk of theft or anything on poolside. After their swim, customers picked up their belongings and they went to the changing rooms to get changed and then out a one-way system that way. By doing this, we didn't use lockers because we were told by public health that after every time a locker was used, it had to be cleansed thoroughly after each use. Now, for us, that's added time and that's added complications, so we shut off all the lockers. Again, keeping it simple as possible. And actually, people quite enjoyed it. people enjoyed a bit of a natter on poolside as they were getting changed. It was like going down to the beach. So from that aspect, it was quite a nice change, and people embraced it. Our customers really did embrace it. And again, be clear. So for example, in our free weights area, only 3 people were admitted at any one time because it's quite a small, close area. It was 2 when we initially opened, but actually the day after we opened, we were reviewing people using the area, and it was clear people were being responsible. So we upped it to 3. And it's that ongoing risk assessment and common sense, pragmatic approach that you can monitor and be agile and change quickly. Next slide, please. Plan and plan some more. You've got time to plan, but it is a case of being agile and adaptable. Our public health guidelines, although we knew we were going to be allowed to open a week before we opened, the exact guidelines for us didn't get released until I think it was the Thursday before, and even then the details were changing on the Friday. So our guidelines had to constantly change to keep up to date with that. So it is a case of being agile as much as possible. And the other thing is use your team. Your operational team know their customers, they know their team members, they know how they're going to react majority of the time. And it's use them to see the things that you might not see. Don't underestimate the cleaning and hygiene requirements. They were the biggest thing for us. And to give you an example, we went through nearly 2,000 plastic pennies in the first 10 days of cleaning and the lifeguarding requirements. So it is a case of don't underestimate that. Again, it will depend on which government guidelines you're following, but our government guidelines were very, very clear, very, very specific. Minimum PPE for cleaning every time we clean the gym after each hour slot with a pinny and gloves. You can see we got through quite a few of those. But it is also a case and emphasis on customers to play their part, to sanitise kit after each use. So there is a case of trying to make sure that the customers are educated as much as possible. Relocate activities to larger spaces if possible. So for us, we had a big events hall that we managed to move all of our activities, our fitness classes and our spinning classes to. And thankfully we've got an events team as well, so we managed to make it a bit like a studio. We put bright lights in. We had the speaker at the front of the class, so it's the microphones and everything else. So it was a good move for us to be able to do that. And it managed to keep the 2 metre distancing throughout. If you've got space to do that, it allows you to keep your capacity up, to keep your membership base up without upsetting anybody. But if you can't, then of course your membership or your class capacities are going to be significantly reduced. Again, proactive communication with customers is essential. The under-promise, the over-deliver. It is a case of being truthful with customers, and we're still doing that now. You won't be back to normal, and some activities won't be allowed or recommended. So for example, in our social distancing phase, we also had clear guidance from public health that any extracurricular activities for under 18s would not be allowed. So there was clear guidance in terms of that we wouldn't be able to put on swim school, for example, or any of the coaching activities for any of the sports. It's understanding, it's trying to get the public on your side to understand that things will not be the same. Even now, we're at a position whereby we're sending out correspondence to our swim school members because of staffing issues following COVID-19 that we will not be able to offer everybody a space in our swim school next September term. And it's being truthful with customers, saying, please bear with us, we are trying our hardest. And your team needs you. They need you to lead and guide, and you need your team for their enthusiasm. Most of them are really, really keen to get back. Most of us are really, really keen to get back. And it is a case of harness that momentum, harness that positivity, and try and infect your customers as well. Everybody wants to get back to some kind of normality, and they're just that enthusiasm is a kind of a once in a lifetime chance to just harness and say that positivity for getting back to normal. Next slide, please. Again, this personal responsibility is encouraged and passed to individuals, and the sense of humour. All of these images and things, again, the use of social media for us was absolutely key. We have a very active social media following, and we've also got really good close relationships with our local media. So prior to the social distancing phase of opening up, we actually had some interviews organised with the local media. We walked through our local ITV station, news station. We walked them through about what the experience would be. And for anybody that wants to go onto our Beausejour Twitter or Facebook page, we've also did a video for the types of things that would be in operation when we first reopened in terms of the social distancing and what customers could expect. So we walked them through the experience so that they understood that it wasn't going to be normal, but we were going to be reopen in some capacity. Next slide, please. Now that we're in what we term our phase 5, which is kind of business as usual, there are also some things that you may want to consider looking long term, and some of the things that customers may have got used to. So, for example, the new normal for cleaning. Apparently our spin bikes are now clean enough that you can eat your dinner off of. For us to go back to what they used to be, which was clean, but obviously not that clean, would be a retrograde step. So you have to think about, okay, what are your capabilities of going forward? If your customers are suddenly getting used to the new standards, how are you going to maintain that? Or are you going to risk losing that good reputation that you built up through the social distancing phase? Some customers have actually really liked the fact that when they book a slot for the gym, they know when they're going to go there that it's going to be very nice and quiet for them. So again, think about how that's going to impact when you take away that booking slot. Most customers have adapted, but we're still getting some going, oh, it was really, really nice, and I knew exactly when I could go in, and I knew that I could use every piece of equipment that I wanted. The other thing is, some people might like the added space. Our spinners absolutely loved being in our event hall. Usually they're in quite a small room. There's about 30 bikes packed into a small space, as many other spinning studios across the country. And they had a 2 metre distancing right the way throughout this hall. So you can see the actual difference. It could be a retrograde step to reverse back. So you just got to manage expectations and say, yes, we're looking after you, but do remember that it might go back to what it was before. And again, it's this not over promising and under delivering. Next slide, please. And understanding and support from your local politicians, be it local councillors or MPs, etc., is really key. Our equivalent to the PM, our Chief Minister, Deputy Gavin St Pierre, is one of our members, and him tweeting about the fact that actually congratulations on the fact that yes, we can't hold a class next week because we're not employing casual labour, and we've got staff booked holiday. Good HR and financial management meant a huge amount to not only the staff, that there was an understanding there from the politicians about what we're doing, but also gives that clear message to the community that yes, things are different and that's fine, that's acceptable. So if you can get that buy-in from local politicians, local councillors, local people of note, people with influence, then do it and try and use them to your advantage. The reality is this is going to be here for us for a long, long time. Yeah, next slide, thank you. So it is going to be with us for a long time. As I said, transition to our new BAU happened last week. So all the social distancing and additional hygiene measures were removed for us. It's essentially, we live in our own little bailiwick bubble. That is, our borders are essentially closed. That anybody coming into the island is subject to a mandatory quarantine for 14 days or risk a significant financial fine. But there are restrictions on staffing, there's changed perceptions within the community, and it isn't like BAU that was prior to lockdown. People are attentive, there's a slow return to normality, but people are still a little bit wary. Customers are still a little bit concerned. We are also taking some time to pause and review, to take stock of what we can do better, and reviewing all our operational aspects. And this includes, for example, the staffing for our Keep Fit timetable. How many casuals do we need, and actually can we use our core team a lot better? So it gives us a chance to pause and review, to question what should we stop doing, what should we start doing, and what should we continue to do. And those three key questions are now being answered by all of our team, because we will never ever get this chance again. Our industry operates 364 days a year. It is continuing. It's continuing to change, and we're always having to adapt. What COVID has done is stop everything that we're doing, and this has a chance now to reset and say, right, okay, what can we do better? What is our purpose? How can we move forward? And certainly that's what we're doing over here. Next slide, please. So in terms of our new normal, it is a new normal because it's not back to pre-lockdown normal. So our swim school isn't operating until September. We're re-evaluating that, bearing in mind our limits on staff. We're not allowed to appoint any staff at the moment. We have a zero recruitment policy. So for example, all the correspondence to customers is stating that they may not have a place in September, but we're working our hardest behind the scenes to get things back up and running. Holiday club isn't operating. Again, we haven't got the staff to organise or to staff it. Fitness classes are limited. As I said before, we're trying not to use casual labour, so it's looking very, very different. So customers need to be aware of that, and again, the proactive communication is key for that. Next slide, please. Try and retain a sense of humour. As you can see, we try to be, keep a smile on our face. So the way customers swim at Beausejour will be changing again, because our community respond to that. They like the fact that we are easy to talk to, hopefully. Our customers have really engaged with this way of thinking, and it reinforces the Guernsey Together spirit that we've built up over this time since March. One of the examples of our government communication, if you can find it on the States of Guernsey Twitter feed, was they released an image of the lockdown haircut trends. So lots of images of cartoon images and names. So you can see in terms of the community spirit, and to build that up through humour is kind of quite key. Next slide, please. And as I said before, this pandemic is going to be with us for a while. And our message now within our phase 5, within our daily bubble is very clear, and it's moved more from a government responsibility to personal responsibility. It's like the next stage. So we're not enforcing anything now, but actually we're still asking people to, to give customers their own personal space, to manage your own personal space, and to exercise good hand hygiene and good personal hygiene. Catch it, kill it, bin it. All of those messages will now be throughout. And the reality is that with everybody playing their part, we're hopeful that the new normal could result in not only people back to activity and customers enjoying themselves again, but also better opportunities and better community cohesion. Okay, thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Sam. I think there were a couple of things in there that I just wanted to back up. First of all, I'm absolutely delighted that nearly everything you've said we've covered in the clinics. So I'm really chuffed about that. But there is two things that we haven't mentioned and I think are really important. The first one was about the looking at how you're going to change things going forward. The spinning people going back into a really dark studio is a really, really good point. And I think for all of us, we've got a great opportunity now to go, how can we change this? It's a really good excuse for us to do things differently. So that's good. And the second thing that dovetails with what you've said is Duncan Bannatyne was on the radio the other day, or the telly, I can't remember what it was, but he'd invited every single MP that lived near his, that was the constituent MP for his gyms, and only one visited his gym. And I think building up, if you can, getting your local MP in, or your mayor, or whoever it is, to come in and actually see what you're doing, I think is a really good shout. We've got a better voice back in Parliament if we do that. So I thought both of those things were really useful, and we've not touched on those. So thank you ever so much, Sam. Just very quickly to finish before we go over to questions, because I'm conscious that we've had quite a long clinic this morning. These are the actions that have been happening with Right Directions. Remobilisation and management procedures have gone out. Risk assessments are now fully on Stitch, and we will be adding swimming lessons onto those in the next few days. We are still here to help. Just come and chat to us at any time. We've also launched today COVID awareness training. It's got a different spin on it because we've included a lot about leisure in it. So please click on the link to register, or go on our website and register. We've kept it at ridiculously cheap price just to cover our costs, £1 per person or £2.50. So I don't think you can get a better couple of hours training for that sort of money. So please sign up to that if you can. Don't forget our 4S's. Every single time we'll keep banging on about these. These are our 4S's. We're still using them. Keep smiling. And Sam hit the nail on the head, humour. When we were designing our training, I did want to put funnies in there as much as possible to try and make people laugh in this situation. Spacing, signage and sanitising, all still the same apply. And obviously still applying in Beausejour now. And I think probably will going forward from what Sam has said. So I'm going to hand over Jill to questions.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Ian. Just before we move on, there is some comments on the chat. So thank you for your presentation, Sam. Some really useful information. Nice to know our pre-planning is heading in the right direction, and useful tips. Love the K that you use in your marketing. Excellent, Sam. Thank you for sharing your experience. So thank you for that. We have one question for you, and this is around how did you manage your spectators and parents of swimming lessons?
Or how are you going to?
So in terms of our social distancing phase, there were no swimming lessons and there were no spectators. It was just people that were booked in, again, going back to the keep it simple. So all of our spectator areas will.
Sam's gone. Sam's gone, so we'll find another question till she comes back for Ian.
Okay, Ian, we knew that you were going to get this around social distancing. So is social distancing for gyms now 1 metre, and should we be signing based on this?
The guidance, I mean, it's quite clear. The guidance that came out on the 23rd was that it is 1 metre plus, and the plus is mitigation. They have not relaxed the 2 metres unless you can put mitigation in place. And mitigation means limiting the time that people are exposed, keeping them turned away from each other, perhaps needing face masks. So the reality is the 2 metres is very much still there. You would have to work very hard to find mitigation, I feel, in a gym that could get you away from that.
So our advice would still be to have the 2 metre signage.
I think so, and I've mentioned repeatedly, I think you still need to think about even whether 2 metres is far enough for things like aerobics. The main route to transmission that they are talking about is through aerosol and droplets. Somebody exercising hard is going to send droplets even more than 2 metres. And I said the sites I went to last week were based their activities on a 2.5 metres, not even 2, because they wanted to go that bit further. And they had placed the space in front of the instructor to be vacant. So in fact, they were achieving about a 3.5 to 4 metre gap between the instructor that was facing any class, which was keeping their instructor safe and keeping those in the front rows from the instructor, because they will be, even with amplification, will be raising their voice and potentially projecting their aerosol and their droplets far further than the 2 metres. So some really good examples I saw last week of people that had thought through the routes of transmission and how they were going to mitigate the risks.
Sam, let's go back to Sam on how you're going to manage parents of swimming lessons and courses and things. Are you out there, Sam?
Yeah, I am back. Technical issues. Yeah, in terms of now, we are back to BAU, so it will be as normal. As I said, we're COVID free now for 60 days, so our risk is very much lower. But we will manage that, and if we need to go back into some kind of social distancing, then we will re-implement it. And to be honest with you, swimming lessons are one of the first things that will probably be looked at in terms of that, in terms of whether we carry on or whether we just put a hold on it for the meantime.
What would you say has been your biggest complaint? What have people been moaning about the most?
The biggest complaint was the fact that so during that phase 3, much the fact about the aerosol droplets is that we didn't allow contact sports, but any other sports were allowed. Now, Public Health decided to understandably classify squash as a contact sport because of the aerosol. But we got a massive backlash from the squash community because we're the only kind of public courts on the island. We have quite a big squash following. They were in arguments. It was the wrong communication message to send out because it's not a contact sport. Yeah. It was so therefore we were being blamed, and we saying, well, why aren't you fighting for us? Well, it's not. That's the guideline. So we have to fight and go back and forth with Public Health to give us an exact why can we not host squash at the moment.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Any more questions, Jill?
Yes, we've got quite a few today. So this one's for Ian. I've been looking at this CIBSE guidance on ventilation and wondered if you have a view on how this might affect ice rink reopening.
We've just actually had an online inquiry regarding that as well, relating to curling, and it's something we're looking more into. I do fully understand the issues with ice because you clearly need to recycle lots of the air. I think it's more to do with the number of exchanges you've got within the room. You will be changing a certain amount over. There is some guidance which I was looking at earlier, which I will do a bit more research on and will probably respond to you directly. But clearly it does recognise as far as it's feasible, and not a categoric. Clearly, if you've got no fresh air exchanges, you're in big trouble. if you can exchange some of it, you need to look at it against the size of the room, the amount of people in it, how much pre-checking you've done on and control over people entering in terms of developing your risk assessments. I don't think there is a clear answer over this. It's an element of common sense. Rooms do need air exchange. Clearly, if there's no air exchange, then and you're just recycling everything, then that's going to be more difficult. But you must be changing some over. But we'll look into it in more detail.
Would you say, Ian, that ice rinks can probably have face coverings quite easily? It's really cold.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, that again, it's protecting the other person. It isn't necessarily protecting the person with a mask on, but if everybody's got a mask on, they're going to be protecting each other. So, yeah, anything like that, if that is one, and it could be a face covering. It doesn't need to be a face mask.
Which can be really cool and trendy and quite good fun, actually. Okay, another question.
Okay, a question for Sam, and then Caroline might want to sort of jump in at the end of this. What topics did you train your staff on before pre-opening?
We obviously went through the RLS. I think we were the first site to go through the revised RLSS training for lifesaving with the COVID-19 edition. So that was key. So that included all of the first aid, which was in line with our St John's ambulance as well over here in our guidelines. The main training actually was, we had a separate kind of raft of guidelines that we produced, which all staff had access to through a variety. It was either Facebook, social media, WhatsApp group, email, because of course not everybody has a work kind of computer or work device. And then before we opened, we had two kind of training meetings whereby it was more a case of giving staff the opportunity to come in. We did it in our theatre, socially distanced, 2 metres apart, but to get everybody in, to see how they were, to check everybody was okay to come into work, to give an overview of what work was going to look like and what activities were going to be open and where we were heading, and to also give them an opportunity, which I think is really important, to ask any questions that they are unsure of. So we did that with all the staff. So all the staff were kind of were invited in to those kind of meetings to basically just get a grip on what the new reality was during that phase 3 of social distancing.
Sam, did you get many people say they didn't want to come back? No, everybody wanted to come back. Missing work.
They were champing at the bit to get that.
Yeah. I think the only question that the only bit that I would add to that is we've said make sure that you've got a document. Do not rewrite all your procedures. Write a document that sits on top of those procedures while we're in this situation. And if we're a year down the line and we need to embed those processes into our proper procedures, then we will. So we've said write that document, and then you can train your staff on that document rather than starting all over again.
Yeah.
So we thought that probably that one, obviously your lifeguarding and first aid. And then the last bit is if you have changed your EAP, so if you have changed your routes or whatever you've changed in that, then obviously you need to change on that. But I think we're probably saying what you've said, Sam. It's changes.
Yeah, and I'm more than happy if the guidance that we've drafted, which is specific for here, I'm more than happy to share, and I have actually shared with numerous operators that have asked me. I'm happy to share. We're all in the same boat. We've got to work together. So if anybody wants, I can either send it to you, Caroline, and you can...
Yeah, brilliant. We will send that out with the document. That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
Right. Any more questions?
Okay, a question for Ian. Has any consideration been given to the continued success of screens globally in the expanding list of countries that now successfully use these to keep more machines in safe use? So these bubbles, Ian, these plastic bubbles around treadmills and other kits in the gym.
I think we commented on this before. I mean, I think we've been very much focused on our own country in the short term. It's still got to do with the quantity of air within the room as a whole. Lots of these bubbles we've seen in many ways just create additional cleaning requirements to clean down the sides of all those screens. If you've got the people to go and clean them regularly, then maybe it's right for you. But personally, I can see it as being more difficult than good if you're still wanting to cram the same number of people into your gym space. Unless you've got really enhanced air handling, you're not going to solve the problem.
Okay, cool.
Okay. We have a question on the job retention scheme, to whether we've had any indication that the government may keep it going for organisations who are closed, and close it early for those organisations that are now open. We have no additional information than what is out in the public domain at the moment. If we hear of anything about changes in the job retention scheme, we'll ensure that they're in the update next week.
We firmly don't believe that they will stop the scheme. I think that would be extremely unfair to put a scheme in and then stop it. But whether or not they'll stop certain industries from using it or not, I think what they're more likely to do is audit organisations who potentially should be back to normal. But even hotels and pubs and everything that's reopening, they may not be able to bring all their staff back. They may be quiet. They may be reducing capacities. They might be deciding not to open just yet. So we haven't heard anything yet. So just to back up what Jill said there.
Okay, Ian, a question on handheld fogging. Somebody's saying that a fairly common feature in videos private gyms is the use of handheld fogging. They appear to give a perception of sanitisation. Any further views on these machines and other similar ones, such as ozone generating units, to do similar around cleanliness?
I haven't heard of the last one, ozone units, but the other ones we've commented on in the past. From a customer confidence viewpoint, they might be helpful. They are extremely expensive, whereas I've seen them giving a time frame that they supposedly last for. It's interesting. I've looked at similar ones on US websites where they make no such claim about the longevity. I also can't see that where they've fogged somewhere supposedly to disinfect it, you will be wanting to clean those surfaces on a regular basis. You will be cleaning off whatever they fogged on it. So that rather limits the time frame. So if you want to spend huge sums of money every day sanitizing it, then maybe, but I can't see how the industry is going to afford it on a sustainability basis. I think it's just about good common sense, positive promotion about the systems you've got in place, and people being able to see your staff cleaning and cleaning properly, not having a dirty cloth that they bung into a grotty bucket of water, or they're doing it properly with some pride and understanding of why they're doing it and how they're to do it. I think that's probably as good a way, given certainly what Sam's comments are about people chomping at the bit. Once people get back in and can see you've got great systems, I don't see why you need to spend the thousands of pounds that these fogging procedures are potentially going to cost you.
Sam, can I just come back to you? You said that you're going to have to keep the standards up with the cleaning. Just briefly, what changes did you make to your cleaning regimes? What's different for the customers? What have they seen as different?
So, for example, so during phase 3, every customer saw the fact that after every booked session, we had 15 minutes to literally bomb gym and go in with our pinnies and our gloves, and we were cleaning every single touch point, and that includes every single dumbbell. So we were blitzing it, and that includes me. That includes any staff that were around and available. Were going in there and helping out and cleaning. They saw it on poolside. Lifeguards were cleaning down the tables after every use. So in terms of that, it's just
You're muted, Sam.
I'll start again. Sorry about that. So from our perspective, in terms of the cleaning, customers saw us going into the gym after every hour slot, and going down and cleaning every single bit of equipment, whether that be a treadmill or whether that be every single piece of dumbbell handle. And at the end of every hour slot, we had 15 minutes to do that, and it would be anybody that was available. So me, my colleagues in the admin offices, we all used to go in and just blitz. And I think that raised the standard and the acknowledgement from the customers who were waiting for their slot that actually we were taking their hygiene and their health very, very seriously. And I think the other thing to bear in mind is that those cleaning standards, so for example in the toilets, the cleaning sheets, sometimes they go out of date. Right now you've got to make sure that they are up to date. So it is making sure all the best practices that we had before, we're making sure that they're taking place. The spin bikes, again, I think it was a case of that they were wiped down briefly, after every use prior to lockdown, and now it is a proper clean, and that is something customers are getting used to. So it's been a good indication to just try and up a level in terms of our cleaning and our hygiene.
Brilliant, thanks, Sam.
A quick question, Ian. Should we allocate mics for instructors?
Ian's gone. Sam, in terms of your aerobics instructors, have they all been given their own mics?
Not their own mics, but they have their own mufflers.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was they should be either given some way of sanitizing them, or the own mufflers is an easy option, isn't it?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Sam.
Ian, there's still a few questions on the chat around 2 meters, the 2 meter guidance. I think maybe what we could do is prepare a brief for next week, and look at the different questions that are coming in on the 2 meters, so that we can share that with the people who are on.
Yeah, I've seen some of them come in. I mean, it is still 2 meters, but other than with mitigation, I think you'll find pubs will potentially be under that, but they are in book tables where it's one group of people coming. They are taking the names of everybody for the test and trace, and therefore there is mitigation around the way some of them are going to have to operate. So it'll be interesting to see how it works. And let's keep our fingers crossed that 14 days later we don't see a rise in hospital admissions, and probably another 7 to 10 days we don't see an increase in the death rate again occurring. So time will tell from this next stage, I think.
There is also a question around track and trace. I think our guidance at the moment is to follow the advice on the NHS. But we're not actually publishing any guidance on track and trace until we get the guidance from the government for leisure, to what they want us to do, particularly around bookings and tracing people back. So
I think it'll be very similar to pubs.
Yeah,
so I think are being asked to keep a track.
But we will update delegates once the government has given us a date to open. And then given us our guidance. Sam, there is a question around your memberships. Somebody's asked, do you know what percentage of your fitness membership has returned in the first 2 weeks?
It's difficult for us to say because we haven't actually necessarily started our memberships back yet. But we do know that within the first 2 weeks, that period of social distancing, we had 4,500 booked slots. So that would be for our swimming, our classes or our gym. And our membership during the lockdown phase has gone, usually was about 2,200, and it actually went down and dropped to about 1,800. So we're now trying to build that back up again.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Ian, I think we need to make this probably the last question. And any others that we haven't asked today, we will make sure that they are on our presentation on YouTube. So Ian, just one more question on aircon and air handling units. We have been informed unless it draws in fresh air and not to have them in gym studios, etc., which makes the areas extremely warm, especially
Right. You broke up slightly at the end there, Jill. I think I understood the question. Where you've got only recycled air, you've got no fresh air being brought in, with no windows. I think it would be extremely reckless in a risk assessment to say it is acceptable to continue physical activity in those areas. Where you've got a recycling air conditioning system that works alongside a refreshing system, then that is clearly something, so long as you're changing the number of air exchanges over there, that will enable you to cool the room. You've got to look at the round of what you've got before making those decisions. And I know lots of people, and it was a question that got raised to me when I was going around some centres last week, where they were saying their AC units are only recycling, but right next to them they got a full air handling system that was changing the number of turnovers within the room. They probably need to ask their supplier or their maintenance companies what the fresh air exchange rates are relevant to the volume of the room. And there is some, as I said, we will look into some more guidance that I saw today to give some indication of what you should be looking at as a minimum to try and make sure you mitigate and are able to complete your risk assessments fully and understand what's going on.
It'll be interesting, Ian, how pubs and restaurants cope, because lots of those don't have any aircon, do they?
Yeah, certainly the smaller ones don't. You'll find lots of the bigger ones, the Wetherspoons or this, like, they do have, and lots of them had fitted them for smoking. And clearly they've probably got quite good circulation systems on some of those pubs that were adapted when the pre-smoking bans really came into place. But yes, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Okay, thank you. I'll hand over to Caroline. There is a few questions in the presentation, but we will make them available on the website.
Yeah, so we'll just, these are the questions. Help yourself to having a look at those. These are the ones that come in this week. So we've run out of time. We obviously don't want to keep everybody. So please make sure that you book onto the clinics. Hopefully, we would love your feedback. So please, any feedback you can on the chat would be great. If you're still happy with these continuing and what we're saying. And again, if you want to book onto the next clinic, you know how to do it, having already done it before. So please book on. As usual, make sure your signage is there. And please leave comments. Love to hear from you. Hope you've enjoyed the clinic. A huge thank you to Sam for presenting. So thank you ever so much. It was great. We'll give you next quest assessor the nod that you've been really helpful. Only joking, that was just a joke. And thank you ever so much, Ian, as well, for presenting, and we'll catch up with everybody very, very soon. Hopefully we'll get some news about leisure opening in the next week or so. Thank you, everybody, and we'll speak to you soon.